I took the night security job because it paid better than anything else I could find that didn't require a degree. At the time, I was 26, recently separated, and living alone in a one-bedroom apartment near the edge of town. I wasn't looking for excitement or mystery. I just needed steady money and quiet hours where nobody bothered me. The facility sat about 15 minutes outside city limits, past the warehouses and trucking yards, where the streetlights started thinning out. It used to be a manufacturing complex back in the 80s. What they made there was never clear in the job listing. By the time I was hired, most of the buildings were supposedly decommissioned. That word came up a lot during orientation. Decommissioned, partially closed, non-operational. They never once said abandoned. On my first day, the site supervisor handed me a badge, a flashlight, and a thick key ring with more keys than any one building should need. He was an older guy, late 50s maybe, with a calm voice and a way of explaining things without inviting questions. He told me my job was simple. Patrol the perimeter, check the gates, walk the interior corridors of the main building every hour, log anything unusual. I asked what counted as unusual. He said, "You'll know." That was the first thing that bothered me, but not enough to turn down the job. The main structure was massive. Concrete walls, narrow windows set high, and long hallways that seemed to stretch farther than they should. Even during the day, it felt dim inside. At night, it felt disconnected from the outside world entirely, like stepping into a sealed environment where time didn't move the same way. They kept a skeleton crew on site during business hours. Maintenance, records management. A few offices were still active, but third shift was just me. No cameras monitored the interior, at least none I had access to. The supervisor said the older systems were unreliable and most had been removed. That should have been another warning sign. My first few nights were uneventful. I followed the route they gave me. I checked doors that were always locked. I passed rooms full of old equipment covered in plastic sheets that never moved. I listened to the building settle, which sounded like distant tapping or popping noises that echoed through the corridors. I told myself it was pipes or temperature changes. I logged everything like I was told. Around the end of the first week, I noticed something small but strange. One of the interior doors on the second floor was unlocked during my 2 a.m. round. I was sure I had locked it at midnight. I checked my log to be sure. I had written it down. Door secured. No issues. I locked it again and assumed I made a mistake. The next night, it happened again. Same door. Same floor. Same time window. I radioed the supervisor the following morning when he came in. He didn't seem surprised. He said that door had a faulty latch and maintenance would look at it. He told me not to worry unless I saw signs of forced entry. There were none. A few nights later, I heard what sounded like footsteps above me while I was on the ground floor. Slow, deliberate footsteps, not the random noises I had gotten used to. These had a rhythm to them, like someone walking down a hallway. I stopped and listened. The steps stopped too. I stood there for almost a full minute, waiting to hear something else. Nothing happened. When I checked the second floor, everything looked normal. No doors open, no lights on, no signs anyone had been there. That was when the idea first crossed my mind that maybe I wasn't actually alone on third shift. I asked the supervisor directly the next morning if anyone else had access to the building at night. He said only management, and they always logged their entry. He checked the log book in front of me. No entries. He told me that old buildings make noises, and that night shifts mess with your head. He said everyone hears things at first. I wanted to believe him. The building had areas that were clearly off limits. Entire wings blocked by metal barriers and warning signs that didn't explain much beyond authorized personnel only. During orientation, I was told not to enter those sections under any circumstances. I didn't have keys for them anyway. Still, when I walked past those barriers, I sometimes felt like I was being watched from the other side. Not in a dramatic way. More like the awareness you get when someone is standing just out of sight. One night, during my 3 a.m. patrol, I noticed one of the barriers was slightly moved, just a few inches out of place. I stopped and stared at it for a long time. The floor around it was dusty, but there were no clear footprints. I didn't touch it. I logged it and reported it in the morning. The supervisor frowned when he read the entry. He didn't scold me. He didn't question my accuracy. He just said he'd take care of it. The next night, the barrier was back where it belonged. That should have been reassuring. Instead, it made me uneasy. By the end of the second week, my sleep schedule was wrecked. I started dreaming about the facility even when I was off work. Long hallways, doors that wouldn't open, the sound of someone breathing nearby without ever seeing them. I chalked it up to stress and caffeine. Then the lights started going out. Not all at once, just sections. Entire corridors would go dark without warning, forcing me to use my flashlight until the emergency lights kicked on. Maintenance blamed the wiring. They said the system was old and unstable. What they didn't explain was why the outages always happened when I was walking alone, never when I was standing still. On the 15th night, during my final round before dawn, I heard a voice for the first time. It was quiet, too quiet to make out words. It came from somewhere deep in the building, past the areas I wasn't allowed to enter. It sounded like someone speaking just above a whisper, but the tone wasn't angry or urgent. It was flat, almost tired. I froze where I stood. I told myself it was my imagination, that exhaustion was getting to me, that the building was playing tricks on my senses. I didn't investigate. I didn't call out. I finished my round and left early, heart pounding the entire time. When I got home, I checked my phone and realized I had missed a call from an unknown number at 3:17 a.m. There was no voicemail. I didn't know it yet, but that call was connected to the facility in a way I wouldn't understand until much later. And once I did, quitting stopped being an option. I tried to convince myself the missed call meant nothing. People get wrong numbers all the time, but the timing bothered me. I had checked my phone during my break around 3, and there was nothing then. The call came in while I was still inside the building, during the same window when I heard the voice. I didn't sleep that morning. I lay on my couch watching daylight creep through the blinds, replaying everything in my head. By the time I left for my next shift, I was already tired in a way that coffee couldn't touch. That night, the supervisor wasn't there when I arrived. Instead, there was a note clipped to the logbook telling me to focus my patrols more on the East Wing. That was odd because the East Wing was mostly decommissioned and normally a low priority. Still, I followed instructions. The farther I went into that side of the building, the colder it felt. Not dramatically cold, but enough that I noticed my breath once or twice. The lights were on, but dimmer than usual, like they were running on backup power. I found another door unlocked. Different floor this time. When I checked the log, it had no previous entry for that door at all, like it wasn't supposed to be part of my route. That made my stomach tighten. I stood there debating whether to open it. I shouldn't have, but I did. Inside was a narrow office space with old desks and filing cabinets. Most of the drawers were empty. The air smelled stale, like paper and dust. On one desk sat a landline phone. Beige plastic, outdated but clean. No dust on it at all. The phone rang while I was standing there. I didn't jump. I froze. My body locked up in a way I had never experienced before. The sound wasn't loud, but it felt intrusive, like it didn't belong in that room. I answered it without really deciding to. No one spoke at first. I could hear breathing on the other end. slow and uneven. Then a voice said my name, not loudly, not threatening, just like someone confirming they had the right person. I asked who it was. My voice sounded thin even to me. The person on the line said they were glad I finally picked up. They said the night staff usually didn't last this long. I asked how they knew my name, and the line went quiet for a moment. Then they told me to check the lower records level. I told them I wasn't authorized to go there. That was true. Everyone knew it. Even mentioning that level during orientation had made the supervisor uncomfortable. The voice said that authorization was a formality, and that I had already been seeing what they needed me to see. The call ended on its own. I stood there for several minutes before hanging up the phone. When I did, I noticed the cord wasn't plugged into the wall. I left the room and locked the door. My hand was shaking so badly it took me 2 tries. I reported the incident over the radio. No one responded. The radio was dead, even though it had worked earlier. I finished my shift without entering the lower level. I didn't hear the voice again that night, but I felt watched the entire time. When morning came, I was relieved in a way that felt unhealthy. I quit 2 days later. Or at least, I tried to. When I went to turn in my badge and keys, the supervisor looked at me with a kind of tired resignation. He said I wasn't scheduled to work anymore anyway. He told me most people didn't make it past 3 weeks. I asked him what the facility really was. He said it had never fully closed because parts of it couldn't be. He said some projects didn't end when funding stopped, and some systems didn't know how to shut themselves down. He told me the night shift existed to make sure things stay contained. I asked what things meant. He didn't answer. A week later, I got another call at 3:17 a.m., same unknown number. I didn't answer. The phone rang until it stopped on its own. After that, the calls became regular, always at the same time. Sometimes there was breathing. Sometimes there was nothing at all. Once, the voice told me they were disappointed I stopped coming in. They said the building remembered me. I changed my number. I moved apartments. The calls stopped. What didn't stop were the dreams. In them, I'm still walking those hallways, checking doors that won't stay locked. I hear the phone ringing somewhere deep inside the building, echoing through levels I was never supposed to see. I wake up every time before I answer it. A few months ago, I drove past the facility out of curiosity. The gates were still there. The lights were still on. The sign out front said the property was inactive, but inactive isn't the same as closed. And I know now that some places don't need people inside them to keep working. They just need someone who once listened.